So true story, let me just start the timer so we don't go 1 second over. So true story, when we were newlyweds, David heard on NPR that couples that stay together have shared interests. And so we went to Lake Jacomo and rented, which is a public county lake. And so we went to Lake Jacomo and rented one of those starfishes, sunfishes, whatever they call it. And within 45 minutes, I had stood up in frustration, capsized the boat, and David had to kick it to shore.
I'm still upset about it.
And where we didn't talk to each other for the next day. And so we kind of abandoned shared interests within a year. But what we
2
found,
weeks.
but what we found is that it's not so much shared interests as interests that are shared. What we figured out is that there's a way that we could, if we talk about what each of us individually are interested in, then we can still coincide. So it's our interpretation of shared interest. And we prepared today's sermon recognizing full well that there are couples that are in the room today, but there are also people that are single, either by choice or not by choice. And so we hope that if the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart are in line with God, that you will still be able to find some meaning and some hope in what we have to say today.
So Julie and I will be married 33 years in about 2 weeks. This is our wedding day to prove that I once had hair. Let me give you a quick recap. Julie was born in Ohio, and she came out here to go to school at the University of Kansas to do an MPA degree to pursue a career in city management. I came out from Southern California, where I went to school and grew up, to come out here for a one-year internship, and that was 40 years ago. We got to know each other a little bit, but it wasn't until a couple of years later when Julie became the assistant to the city manager in Gladstone and I was the assistant city manager in Liberty, towns next door to each other, that we began working together. One day I had a particularly rough budget hearing and I called her and said, "You want to go for a beer?" And she said, "No, but I'm going because I'm going to the police chief's house." So our first date was at the police chief's house. And nonetheless, we got, after that point in time, we really didn't date for a long time. If we ever dated, we were just friends. We went out to movies, we went to each other's work events, and we just hung out a lot. And during that period of time, Julie decided she was going to take a job as the assistant city manager in Reno, Nevada. And about the time she moved was about the time it finally dawned on me that there was something else going on. So I kind of panicked, and I chased her across country for a year, and finally, we got married, and we stayed out there for the first year of our marriage. We had a commuter marriage cross-country. And during that period of time, I was then given an opportunity to become the city manager of Liberty. And we had these long, hour-long conversations during the 1980s on typical telephones about how to deal with that. Will we follow her career? Will we follow mine? Where would we take our lives together? And I thought we really communicated well. And a year later, she finally moved back to Kansas City. Well, it turns out the process of her redirecting her career, and she's gone on to have an amazing career at UMKC, doing a variety of roles over the years, but the process of her redirecting her career was really hard on her, and it was really hard on our marriage. Where I thought we were communicating, in fact, we weren't. And we had to make a decision where she ended up sacrificing her career goals for mine rather than our finding the intersection between what I wanted to do, what she wanted to do, and what we wanted to do together. And so what we want to talk to you a little bit today are some of the questions we ask ourselves from time to time to try to communicate better and to act with more intentionality and mutuality.
So one of the key questions that we ask ourselves is, does this hold meaning? And so let me contrast that with what doesn't hold meaning. So what doesn't hold meaning is my love for John Grisham novels or Spider Solitaire. So when I engage in those, that has no meaning. But but the rest of my life does. So I work at UMKC, where I teach, and this job, as you could imagine, is crafted around me. So we send students out into the community as part of their class. That's called service learning. I teach graduate students and professional students how to be competent and respectful around people with disabilities. So giving those folks an extra credential. And then I also support women and girls that want to be involved in the community. And in that case, my signature program is Madam President Camp, where I teach middle school girls at their most awkward age how to run for student council. And so it's a wonderful combination. But in addition to my work, my avocation, in addition to my vocation, my avocation has been, I've been blessed enough to have a child with a disability who, before she was born, I was on all these good things, you know, so I was on this camp or this board or that board or the United Way board. But then I started being able to focus my avocational interest on the inclusion of people with disabilities. And so I found meaning in how I spend my time there. And in addition to that, then I choose to walk as my exercise. So that's, I do about 5 miles a day on most days. And even that has meaning because I can walk my errands, I save the environment, I pick up trash, I check out the neighborhood, I meet people. And so everything except for the John Grisham novels and the Spider Solitaire has meaning, and that in turn is what gives me energy. I heard on Facebook, always take the Facebook advice, right? But it was like, you don't have to be busy. And that's a thought that I reject because I really like to be busy. And one more thing I want to say is that things that are tedious can also have meaning. So I do a lot of tedious things, but they have meaning, so it's okay. So anything with the word budget in it is like, I don't like, but it has meaning because it allows me to do the other things. And so if you are you all have we all have the same resources, time and money. And so I would encourage you to start thinking about spending your resources with money, even if it might be tedious.
One of the other questions we ask ourselves from time to time to help us find a sense of intentionality about how we live our lives and what choices we make is, are we building community? Julie and I attach a lot of importance to the sense of purpose and belonging that come from the idea of community life, from fostering community life. It is why we both chose careers in public service. We enjoy focusing on issues that are inherently about creating the conditions in which everybody can thrive, which is the core of public problem solving. And it's also the essence of a good relationship, creating the conditions in which our individuality can be advanced through our relationship. This idea is captured in Scripture. In fact, a few weeks ago, Paul asked a random set of people sitting over here, don't get used to our seats over here, Hunleys, because we're going to be back next week. And by chance, he asked asked me to read the first 6 verses of Ephesians, which for me speaks to the value that we get from creating relationships like marriage or church community or civic solutions that honor and enrich the lives of the individuals. Ephesians, therefore, as prisoner for the Lord, I encourage you to live as people worthy of the call you received from God. Conduct yourselves with all humility, gentleness, and patience. Accept each other with love, and make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that ties you together. You are one body and one Spirit, just as God also called you into one hope. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. Let me repeat, Paul says, make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that ties you together. Paul here, I think, is honoring the dignity of the individual through the process of building up the entire community to find a higher purpose that binds us together. In this case, he's referring to the church, but I think it refers to a marriage. I think it refers to a church community. I think it refers to civic life, that we honor each other through our humility, our gentleness, and our patience through the act of building up a community in which we all thrive.
So one of the things that I think sets us apart is that we are able to, I don't want to do that, to articulate our values. And share our values. So that sounds easy, but it's really hard. So the first thing you have to do is articulate your values and go beyond, I like peace, joy, and world understanding, or whatever it is. But really be able to drill down and say, what is it that drives you and makes a difference? And then when you can articulate your values, then you can share your values. And so I'll give you an example. So we were living in Liberty, Missouri, and we were looking to move somewhere. And we found this old house that was at that point maybe 90 years old rambling house with 5 bedrooms, and it was under $100,000, if that gives you an idea about the opportunities that existed in the house. It had a calico curtain around the cast iron sink. And when we were trying to figure out what to do, we said, does this align with our values? And the decision was made. And the answer was yes. It was the idea of taking something old and bringing it back to life. It was the idea of giving our children a place where they would be exposed to people that were different than them. It was the chance to walk. It was the chance to integrate our lives. I worked at UMKC and David worked downtown. And there was a church across the street that we thought might hold promise for us. And so all those things together, we thought it was an intentional choice that represents our values.
And speaking of the church, I think that this perhaps is the most important community that is a part of our lives. We had a book discussion last week, and some of you were there. Carol Taylor attended, and we were talking about places that we love around the world. And Carol Taylor said, I don't know if Carol's here this morning, said, I love this place. I walk into this church and I just sigh and I feel a sense of belonging. And we feel similarly about this community. I value and I'm grateful for so much. We had a marvelous covenant class today, as we often do, and I'm so grateful to people like Bill Eckert and Dave Jeter, and before them, Doug Hunley, who take this class so seriously and have allowed me to deepen my understanding of the Bible and to grow in my faith. We are grateful to the pastors and staff currently and preceding that have nurtured our family and supported our relationship. We have gotten amazing support from this congregation over the years. Some of you may recall when our kids were very young, Julie was hit in her car and her back was broken, and it was a very stressful time, and we would not have gotten through that period of time but for the support that we got from many of you in this room. You're raising us. You're especially embracing and allowing Mary to mature into such an exceptional young woman is a remarkable gift you've given us. The ministries that I'm involved in have been presented through this congregation. I spend a lot of time on a ministry called Linwood Area Ministry Place, as does Jim Scott and Kite Singleton and Bob Banker. It's a campus of community services that has at the 31st in Linwood, in an old Presbyterian church, and I think we are making an important difference, and I would not be in that place but for this church. The other thing, this community is our tribe. This is our social context. For 15 years, we went out with a large group, many of you in the room here today, to the YMCA camp of the Rockies. We all drove across Kansas at the same time, and we hiked together, epic hikes, and we developed just an incredible bond. We created an opportunity for our kids to grow up together, and we created relationships that sustain us forever. This is a picture go ahead, of Keith Anderson making fun of me one day. And I keep this on my refrigerator. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. He's just making fun of the way I would dress every day, as he often would. And I keep it on my refrigerator because every time I look at it, it brings a smile and a sense of belonging and sort of represents all of you in this room. You have been important to creating a context for our marriage, to giving us a community to belong to, a group of people we can lean on, and a group of people, frankly, we can invest in and love. And investing and loving together another group of people is a large part of what's held our marriage together.
And I will say that we agreed to do this because we knew that you had promised God to love us. So we knew that it couldn't go too bad. The other question that we ask ourselves is that are we solving a problem for ourselves, for our families, or are we helping the system? So we've had opportunities to, so raising a child with a disability, Mary, we were lucky enough and blessed enough to be provided a built-in mission. And so when Mary was born, we realized that the society that existed was not the society we wanted for her. And so we have continued to ask ourselves, how can we support the system to be better rather than ourselves? And so let me give you an example. And so one of the things that so before I was on these nice to do things, this thing, that thing, and so I really started focusing on the inclusion of people with disabilities. And this was one of our first forays, is that David and I created a league, a soccer league for inclusive players. And so half of these people, half of the children have a disability and half don't. And this soccer team has created lasting friendships, at least that we know about. So Mary was in one girl's wedding 2 years ago. And so this kind of experience has endured. We went from there to building an inclusive program in the Catholic schools called FIRE. And more recently, together, we started a nonprofit to support inclusive programs at universities and colleges. And so our first thing was maybe 8 years ago, where we raised $500,000, not from ourselves, thank you, but from other people. We collected money and gave it to the University of Central Missouri to develop an inclusive program. We have now done 3 programs and have inspired 2 more. And we're about to launch a new program at a local community college. And then within that, I am also an advisor to Mayor Sly James on people with disabilities and belong on several boards. And it's all about the system rather than the person.
One of the other questions that we ask ourselves when we're trying to stay focused on what we want to achieve is, are we caring or are we taking care? I have shared this story before, but the week before my oldest daughter Anna was born, my brother was killed in a plane wreck. His plane went missing in the Upper Peninsula, and the community response to that circumstance was incredible. Hundreds of people took weeks off of their lives to go search for his plane, which wasn't found until years later. The community held fundraisers. There were people every day helping with the kids. It was just an amazing outpouring of support from this community of strangers. And when I commented to my sister-in-law about how that community had rallied around her family when members of our own family were not so helpful or responsive, she said to me, you know, they care, but they don't know how to take care. And action is important. It's not simply caring, but taking care, going beyond words and intentions to make a difference. And we often fall short as a couple. We make excuses, we get busy, we just fall short often. But we ask ourselves that question from time to time to remind us what we really do care about and to inform our decisions. Again, as Paul says in Ephesians, conduct yourselves with all humility, gentleness, and patience. Accept each other with love and make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with the peace that ties you together. He says, conduct yourselves. Make an effort. These are words that go beyond caring. They are words of action to encourage us to take care of each other. And this applies directly to our marriage. We have always and always do care for one another, but we don't always take care of one another. And it's only when we do that our marriage thrives.
The last question, is it the last question? Yeah. Is, are we staying healthy? And that goes again to meaning. Because if you aren't staying healthy, then you don't have the energy, you don't have the ability or the stamina to get up and produce and to create meaning in your life. And so I walk, and then my own personal superpower is sleeping. It's what restores me. It's also, I have very vivid...
Keeps her out of a lot of household tasks.
And so I have this vivid imagery, and a true story is that the day after Paul asked us to do this, I went to, when I woke up that morning, the image that I woke up with was a dried used sponge. And in case that was just too Freudian and I couldn't figure it out, then the day of death came on top of the sponge, knowing that maybe I was just a little too stressed out about the whole thing. In summary, we argue over, we fight like Roman gladiators about who will take out the trash. But we do agree when it's a big issue. We try to respect each other. We embrace being busy, because busy means is that we are providing meaning, and meaning is never exhausting.
One of the ways that I stay healthy is that I'm a runner, and I've never been a talented runner, and now I'm just an old runner. But I enjoy it a lot, and when you run, one of my running books suggests is essentially a process of falling forward. You have to lean forward and then move your foot so that your other foot catches you before you fall. And it is really important, if you're going to do that well, to engage your core. And the stronger your core is, the better off you can move and run and fall. I just went off for a minute. And I think that that's a good metaphor for many situations in life, that maintaining a healthy relationship, doing a job, going to work, you got to lean in, you got to fall forward, you have to take risks. And when we have a strong sense of our values, of our core principles, we can fall forward in a direction with confidence in the decisions and choices we make. Having a strong faith that in the knowledge of God's grace allows us to lean into life with confidence and with certainty that God will catch us before we hurt. I just want to say this is our this is Mary and me on the trolley run. But anyway,
for the record,
yeah,
we have two.
Let me just close with this. This is just a record of a recent picture of our entire family, and I just really want to close by saying that we have been blessed in so many ways. We have been challenged in a lot of ways, but we have endured, I think, because we try, when we can, more often than not, to lean into each other, to lean into our faith, and to be in touch with the values that give us all meaning. And as Julie said at the beginning, our only prayer for today is that we did you no harm. Thank you.